Nowadays, if you need a Unix system, there is a very limited set of options. If we are talking about the desktop space, macOS is by far the biggest. Most people just don't use it like a Unix system though, but there are a lot of tech people, professors, developers, things like that absolutely swear by it. There are a lot of people out there who also make use of some form of BSD, whether that's OpenBSD, FreeBSD, and things like that, but most of that usage is in things like servers. But for the most part, when we are talking about Unix in a modern context, we are generally referring to Linux. But this wasn't always the case. There was a time where Linux didn't exist yet, and during that period, the space was basically dominated by all of these companies offering their various proprietary Unix offerings, competing over a fairly small but growing market share. When Linux hit the scene though, that all changed. Linux put a lot of these companies pretty much out of business or forced them to shift into other ventures as it pretty much devoured all of the market share. And a big part of that is it's free, and it coincided with the growth of the internet, so it made it incredibly competitive compared with the other offerings. Obviously, it was also good, but not having to pay for it is a pretty big deal. But there was one particular company who wasn't exactly happy about this, that being the SCO Group, who in 2003 filed not one, not two, not three, but 4 separate lawsuits against companies using Linux. Now, an important distinction needs to be made between SCO, Santa Cruz Operation, and the SCO Group. The SCO Group was originally called Caldera Systems, before eventually renaming into Caldera International, and then eventually the SCO Group. They purchased the rights of Unixware, SCO Unix, and a bunch of other software from SCO. They were not the ones who actually made it. The original SCO went on to become Tarantella Inc. They are completely unrelated to these lawsuits. When they acquired these rights, they changed their name to the SCO Group, and not even a year later after acquiring these rights, they went on an absolute rampage against SCO's ex-customers who are now using Linux, with the most famous lawsuit, you've probably heard of this one, being SCO versus IBM. But that's only one of them. They also went after AutoZone. Yes, that AutoZone that sells car parts. Also, Daimler Chrysler, now known as the Mercedes-Benz Group, along with a company called Novell. This was a software development firm mainly developing corporate projects. Also, the original owners of SUSE Linux. So, let's go all the way to the start with SCO versus IBM in 2003, whereby the SCO Group basically argued that Linux is really good, and it shouldn't be really good. It got really good way too quickly. So surely, IBM must have shared some SCO trade secrets with Linux kernel developers, copying code owned by the SCO Group into the Linux kernel, violating their copyright, and being a breach of their software licensing agreement, thereby lowering the value of the Unix offering owned by the SCO Group. This had some interesting reactions from the FOSS world, like the Linux operating system was unlikely to contain Unix code, as it had been written from scratch by hundreds of collaborators with a well-documented provenance and revision history that was entirely in the public view. Caldera Systems had begun as a Linux company before buying SCO's Unix business and certain assets related to it, and has added many Linux-like features to SCO Unix, and any common code may have in fact been copied from Linux into SCO Unix. And Linus Torvald saying, "I allege that SCO is full of it, and that the Linux process is already the most transparent process in the whole industry. let's face it, nobody else even comes close to being as good at showing the evolution and source of every single line of code out there. So far, we've been in the tame section. From now on, it only gets more ridiculous. Following this lawsuit against IBM, and while it was still pending, a lawsuit was filed against the SCO group by Red Hat. They wanted the court to make a permanent injunction against SCO's campaign against Linux, basically make them stop doing it, and make 2 declaratory judgments that Red Hat has not violated SCO's copyright and that Red Hat has not violated SCO's trade secrets, and several other claims for relief, with the SCO group responding by saying, "Of course, we will prepare our legal response as required by your complaint. Be advised that our response will likely include counterclaims for copyright infringement and conspiracy." I must say that your decision to file legal action does not seem conducive to the long-term survivability of Linux. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. This lawsuit remained pending based on the result of SCO versus IBM. Now it gets even more fun. Throughout all of this, the SCO group were claiming that they were the owners of Unix. Not just the owners of their specific version of Unix, but they were the owners of the Unix copyright. Novell weren't exactly too happy about this because years prior, they had purchased something called the Unix System Laboratories from AT&T, and with this came the Unix copyright and the original Unix source code. Editing Brodie here. This source code was partially contained within Unixware, which was eventually purchased by SCO and passed on to the SCO group, but the copyright for Unix was separate from this. And years prior, they had already settled a case with the Berkeley Software Distribution, otherwise known as BSD, over who is the rightful owners of Unix. This was a part of a greater saga called the Unix Wars. Maybe at some point I'll do a dedicated video on that. Now, during all of these lawsuits, Novell put out a press release basically saying we support Linux and making it very clear who the owners of Unix are and the fact that the SCO group are not those owners. And they weren't exactly too happy about this and called it slander, which they desperately needed to be true due to something known as the SCO Source Division. They were going around to Linux customers, primarily in the corporate space, and charging them $699 per CPU to be using Linux, because if they really own Unix, then they can charge you whatever they want to be using a Unix system. So, as you might expect, the SCO group filed a lawsuit against Novell. Now, this idea of charging people money for something that they absolutely shouldn't be charged for, this was not a one-time thing that SCO Source was doing, and this actually led to 2 of the lawsuits, those being with AutoZone and Daimler Chrysler. Both of these companies were at one point customers of SCO and then the SCO group, but they were like, you know what, this Linux thing, it does everything we need, it's free, so the SCO group straight up tried to sue their ex-customers for switching to a competitor. Initially, Daimler Chrysler didn't even respond to their letter. They just, we don't care. Which is actually what a lot of companies did when they got a letter from SCO Source. They didn't have any rights to be charging people for Linux, so go away? We just don't care. But the SCO group disagreed. They claimed that because they owned Unix, that these companies that were using Linux and not paying the money were in violation of their Unix copyright, which they claimed they had. So everything hinged upon the fact that they owned Unix and that Unix code was being used in Linux. Basically, it was this giant castle being built on sand, and they really hoped there was some rock under that sand. So how did all these claims end up going? Well, the first one to be dealt with was Daimler Chrysler. In 2004, SCO and Daimler Chrysler were basically in agreement to dismiss the case. I think they might have taken on a bit too many cases at once and didn't really know what to do. But they could pursue the case again in the future. Granted, they paid Daimler Chrysler's legal fees. In 2009, after the SCO group had already gone bankrupt and it was going through the bankrupt court, a private settlement was made between AutoZone and the SCO group. In 2010, a jury determined that Novell did in fact own the rights to Unix, which they already knew they owned, leading to them being awarded $2.5 million. And finally, in 2021, IBM settled, paying the now bankrupt SCO group, handled by the TSG bankruptcy trustee, $14.25 million, under the demand that they go away and not bother them again. They didn't agree that they were in the wrong here, they were just sick of dealing with them, and it was cheaper to pay them. Now, this video was basically like a surface level look at all of these things going on. Honestly, I could probably make a 10-part series and there would still be more to cover. Just let alone the fact that Microsoft probably funded a good part of the lawsuit if you go back and look at the Halloween documents. If you have not seen that video, go and check it out. If you want to see a really great article about this, just focusing on the IBM case, there is a really great write-up over on LWN. I highly recommend you go and read it. Also go and check out the Wikipedia articles and all the things they link to. There is so much stuff going on here, and I'm sure you're gonna have some fun with it. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Did you know about this lawsuit? Do you think the entire thing was ridiculous? Do you even care that it happened and you think Windows is better? I would love to know. So if you like the video, go and like the video. If you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, Scribe, Sully, Berapelli, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and Red Hat bad. Actually, Red Hat's good in this case, I guess.
Like this.